Hi, everyone. I am very excited about this conversation. I have had the privilege of getting to know Peter Katz. For the last year, Peter and I are both represented by the best speaking agency in the world, Speaker Spotlight. And they connected us because Peter was gracious enough to work on one of our events where we give back to the community. And we were able to do a concert and a talk across the world, actually. But as I got to know Peter, I recognize that he right now is managing attention in a real deliberate way. He may not have known this, but I could see it in action. So I said, would you mind if I ask you a few questions? Because a lot of you know that we talk often about the necessity to hold change and stability and tension. You know, this idea of innovating and pivoting and adapting needs to be held in tension with holding on to what matters, making sure we don't get lost in the shovel or live in a world of chaos and confusion. And that applies certainly to our teams, to our organization, to our personal lives. Well, what I've been watching with Peter is, Peter's life has been, I believe, Peter's singer-songwriter, touring the country, touring the world, a musician who also is represented to speak as well. Well, virtual happened with the pandemic, and Peter became one of the most sought after speakers in Canada and across the world. And not only to sing and perform, but to talk. And you know what was fascinating to me is it wasn't just, okay, I'm going to learn to use Zoom. If you work with Peter, it's an entire experience, leveraging technology and tons of innovation to make this virtual experience pretty incredible. I've been intrigued to say, okay, but you still are at heart a singer-songwriter. I mean, I know even in some chats that we've had that, you got to carve out time for being creative and being an artist at your heart. So, I said, I'd love to ask you for personal reasons, but I think, our community would love to know, how do you manage that tension between holding on to, your core while at the same time innovating and changing? So, Peter, I gave you a bit of a heads up that I was going to talk to you about this, but I'm going to narrow it down to just a few questions. So first of all, thank you for joining me today and for being willing to share a little bit of this tension I think you're managing quite brilliantly. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. On the change stability side, I'm going to ask you a little bit about what I refer to often as action steps. What are things that you do that allow you to get the upsides of both change and stability? And then we'll get into what we refer to as red flags. What are indicators, ideally early warnings, that you're maybe overdoing one to the neglect of the other? Does that work?
That works for me, Tim.
Okay, so let's start with the change side, because I feel like in the last 2 years, you've been living here quite a bit. What are things, or even a thing that you do, that allows you to get the benefits of change? So innovation, pivoting, other overused words that we've done this last few years. How do you do that? How have you done that this last few years?
Well, I guess I'll just start by saying that this is a big challenge, right? And you began with starting off with sort of this tension that I hold between artist, creator, and then also speaker, facilitator, and these kind of emergent wings of what I do, and how do I keep all of that in balance? Not to mention just the layer of life, right? and life change and all these things that we try to do. So I'll just say that is I don't have this perfected. It's something that I spend a lot of time navigating, working through it, and obviously I have some thoughts on the matter, but I'm a work of art in process as well, personally.
Aren't we all?
But I guess there's a couple of things that come to mind. So first of all, when I think about change, I try to think of it as see it like a child that you're watching grow up, and you don't kind of see the change every day, and then someday your child has a mustache and you're like, what happened? And so with anything that's kind of going on in my life, I try to not take in the totality of the picture, but it's like, what is this thing that's in front of me now, and then now, and then now, and then now, but then within that, having some kind of arc. Like I remember hearing Bill Gates talk, and he said, we overestimate what we can do in a day, but we underestimate what we can do in a year.
Hmm.
And so for me, it's all about like kind of, how do I take these things that are changing, and how do I kind of move them into bite-sized chunks? And as I'm talking about change, I also feel like there's sort of a subdivision. There's like the change that happens that is not in our control. And then there's the change that we actually want to create, like these projects that we want to do, or the people that we want to grow into. So for the things that are sort of not in my control, the way that I navigate those is like mindfulness practice, therapy, just having those anchor points where I'm sort of taking care of the foundational engine. I really care a lot about food. Like, I'm a whole food, plant-based vegan, and that's like super important to me. So those kind of like baseline consistencies help me with the things that I sort of can't control. And then with the things that are changing, that are sort of the things that I'm aspiring to and have ambitions to change, then I think about those things in these like, okay, what's the moonshot vision, and then what's the 3-month plan, and the 3-minute plan, and everything in between. So yeah, those are some of the things that come to mind as you ask that question. And last thing that comes to mind for me is again, sort of touching back on the mindfulness piece. I had the honor of studying and learning from a man by the name of Dr. Danny Friedland. He actually just recently passed away from a cancerous brain tumor. It's just devastating. But one of the things that he talked about, which is a common sort of mindfulness practice, is this idea of pause, notice, choose. Pause, notice, choose. And that is like running through my brain in all times, whether I'm feeling like emotionally reactive about something, which change often causes that. It's always about pause, notice, choose. Like, okay, how do I want to be in this moment? And that mantra is one of the most helpful tools for me.
That's fantastic. And so simple. It's, I mean, if I could just hold on to that, that's fantastic. I want to go one step further on the change side, because my hunch is that you may have found yourself here once or twice in this past few years. You're living in this place of change, adaptation, pivoting. Would you have any red flags or early warning signs that maybe we're over focusing on change to the neglect of the core, what matters, our true north? Like, how would you know that that's starting to happen?
Well, I think for the purposes of this conversation, I'm going to focus in on the second kind of change that I talked about, which is the change that we actually are instigating, like the change that we want. I want to grow into this. I want to develop this business. I want to change my organization, whatever that might be. Because the first part of the change that is happening kind of to us, it's about reframing it and making it like for us. We hear that all the time. Life doesn't happen to us; it happens for us, right? But as far as the our ambition, these things that we're trying to create, the things that we're going after in our lives, which is causing all of this change. For me, I'm certainly somebody who's incredibly ambitious. I'm always, trying to do this, that, the next thing. But the red flag for me is if I'm actually not enjoying the fruits of the labor, if I find myself numb, if I just do a great keynote, for that was like a huge work, a huge project, and I don't even appreciate it. I don't feel it. And so, Brene Brown talks a lot about like our emotions, that you can't kind of numb selectively. So if you're numbing your pain, you're numbing your overwhelm, you're also numbing your joy. And so if I find that I'm in this place of numbness and I'm just kind of going through the motions, on paper, I'm actually realizing the product of my change, but I'm not sort of feeling it, appreciating it. I'm not able to pause and notice and choose to be grateful for these things.
Yeah.
Then that's a real red flag for me, that I'm kind of on this path of burnout.
It just, as you're saying that, it makes me think too, if you're in a position of leadership, how important it would be to check in with your team on that, because it'd be easy to think, oh, this is great, everyone's feeling great. But are we doing okay? Yeah, that would be interesting to even assess across the board. That's really, really interesting response. Let me shift gears. And, going back to action steps, what would be, something that you do, that you've done, that you try to prioritize to hold on to what matters, to make sure, I mean, you and I were chatting before the interview about just the busyness of life and continuing to navigate through the next normal. How do you make sure that as all this change is happening, we don't emerge with realizing we lost what matters? What are things that you do or you prioritize?
Well, it's funny. Like I kind of like the through lines that you're making between like our personal lives and then also like sort of organizationally, right? And so we've talked about this privately. Like I'm a big fan of appreciative inquiry and like asking great questions. And whenever we work with like an organization, it's like one of the key questions that you always ask is like what's working now?
Hmm.
Like if everything were to change, what are the things that we
Great.
want to hold on to? And actually when we're able to anchor into those things that are working, that creates the spaciousness for us to be open to the change. So if I apply that to my own life, I guess I would use the word like through lines, like the things for me that are the stabilizing factors. I already touched on them already, but I mentioned mindfulness. So I work with a mindfulness coach, and no matter like come hell or high water, no matter what my schedule is, I always take that appointment with her every 2 weeks, and I always leave the hour after that appointment to go for a walk.
Hmm.
And I'm in the thick of one of the absolute kind of busiest times in my life, both personally and professionally. But I had my session with her yesterday. I was moved to tears. It was such a beautiful session. I entered the session thinking like everything was fine. And then when you kind of pause and you take the moment, you're like, oh my gosh, I have all these things that I need to process. And then I went for my walk, and like that hour plus the hour walk, those 2 hours will be the fuel and the sustenance that I need over the next 2 weeks.
Hmm.
And so what are those core things that when you do those things, undeniably they put you into that good place? And I think we want to pick those things wisely, because there's things that we do to like unwind, to kind of numb out, that don't necessarily give us the same benefits that we think they're giving us. And I'm certainly a victim of this. At the end of the day, like, scroll Instagram for an hour or two, and you're just like, you don't have that feeling of having refilled the tank. So I'm really intentional about what are those through lines that no matter what, I'm going to do that thing. And I know I've got the appointment booked. I'm going to be back in my mindfulness session. I work with a therapist. Again, I'm going to be back in that session doing that grounding. I mentioned this already, like food, like what am I putting into this body? We are just human beings.
Hmm.
And what is the fuel that we're putting into our bodies so that our brains can work, our hearts can beat lightly? Like, it's so important. And so no matter what, I don't sacrifice the quality of the food that I'm putting in my body. I don't sacrifice my walk. Everything else can go crazy, but those things sort of help anchor me within the storm. And everybody's going to have those different things that resonate for them. Although I would argue that there are sort of scientifically proven things like connection to nature, like a gratitude practice. Dr. Robin Henley Defoe talks about these things. Having some time for self, music. Those are the things that can, if we can layer those, then we can kind of handle whatever changes ahead.
It's fantastic. I mean, the two things that I'm hearing you say over and over is, one is, first of all, knowing what those things are. So a prioritization of what are those things that I have to hold on to no matter what, and a
Mm-hmm.
scheduling element. Like it's fine to know them, but are they on the calendar? Are they in my rhythm? Which I think, again, in times of change, could be easy not to have time for it this week or not to have time for it this month. So that's really helpful.
Yeah, and I want to follow up on that, Tim, because I think you're making an amazing point. And this is something that I literally just started doing about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I have an amazing EA now who works with me named Trevor. And what was happening was that like the days were so full that the prep time, for example, that was required to prepare for a talk or to write a song or to, like any of these things, they weren't in the calendar. And so I had a false sense of how much time I actually have. So I actually got him to now layer into my calendar, like, okay, for these 4 hours this week, you're writing the report for sick kids. And then, okay, you're writing your talk for Tim. And so all of a sudden my calendar is a lot more full.
Mm.
And that tells me, okay, I actually can't take that meeting, or I can't go for that coffee, or, that's like not the coffee I really want to go for. Like I actually have a deeper sense of what I actually can and can't do because it's in the calendar.
That's great. That's just seeing it, when you're seeing all that space in between put on the calendar, it's probably pretty shocking in a good way. I got one more question. So and this may not be one that you resonate with much these days, but it's a real place. And this is when we've recognized that we've been really good at holding on to stability, holding on to what works, core values, proven practices, but maybe to the neglect of change. Maybe this has now been over focused on, and the goal in organizations is don't become Blockbusters or Sears Canada. Be aware of it before you get close to that spot. And I think personally as well, when all of a sudden you realize like, wow, this is no longer working for me. What would be a red flag or an early warning that maybe I'm a little bit stability focused to the neglect of change? Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, one thing that came to mind on the personal front, if you're still listening to the same songs you listened to in high school, it's a red flag. You gotta
say it's not true.
You got to expand your horizon. I mean, you can still listen to them, but is it all you're listening to? That's more of a joke, but kind of true. There's lots of great music.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I guess the thing that comes to mind when I hear that is that sort of like wake up in the morning feeling. Like when you wake up in the morning, that's such a special time for us to kind of know where we're actually at. Our brain has been, defragging and cleaning itself out, and we're sort of like, there's these precious few moments. And I would say in that moment, if I have that sort of, oh yes, another day, I know what's about to happen, that kind of sense, then I'm probably not pushing myself enough to be growing. And it's kind of like, the analogy that people always use around water, right? Like this sort of stagnant water kind of festers and grows moldy, and yet the river is alive and full of life. And so I feel like when you're doing things that are challenging you, that are like a little bit overwhelming in a good way, then you kind of wake up with this sense of, oh, like I'm going to have to grow into the person that can do that thing. There's this energy and this vitality. And I think if you sort of have a sense of like, I know exactly what's going to happen, then it's probably time to destabilize yourself a bit. And I would take that back into the personal realm of, do I assume I know who my partner is? Do I assume I know who I am and what I'm capable of? Do I assume that I know who my mother is? And so just recognizing that the foundation of life, like down to the cellular level, is change. And if we feel like we know everything, then it's time to shake things up, because the truth is that person you married is not that same person, and you're not the same person. And what's possible for you is not what was possible. And I personally like to be slightly on that knife's edge for my whole life, because I feel like that's telling me that I'm constantly growing, and I'm living into the essence of what it means to be alive.
Yeah, it's a great challenge. As someone who would consider myself middle age, of course, that's a big range, but in that space, I think it's something you have to continually tell yourself, and it's a choice, right? It's actually way easier to bask in comfort, but to actually keep pushing and on all those levels. Yeah, it's fantastic. I really appreciate that perspective. First of all, thank you. I have just had a blast kind of watching you and your career the last little while as you continue to, emerge with the core, but in all these innovative ways. And I've actually been inspired and learned a lot from you. So thanks for sharing that with some of our community today. Just got a tiny bit of time left in the last minute that we have. I feel like I'd be making a huge mistake not to ask if you would share with us your gift of music, maybe a new song I could add to my playlist, if that's possible.
Well, Tim, I always have a guitar nearby.
I was just saying, and happens to have a guitar, right? But the reality is that's always your story. So, tell me what are we gonna hear?
Well, do you want a full song or just like a minute of a song? Either is fine.
No,
I know where.
I want you to. You asked, so I'm going to push back. Sing something that you've been working on or inspired by lately. Something you'd say, "Wow, this isn't my American Pie and the concert." So something you've been working on, inspired by.
Okay, well, this is going to be like majorly letting a cat out of the bag, Tim. So you'll have the hounds. I'll take a risk here. I won't play the whole song in case it leaks out into the world because I want to reserve the right to change and edit it. But I'll give you a little taste.
All right.
I'll give you a little taste of this is like literally never been heard in the world. I don't even know what key it's in. Okay, I think that's roughly the right key. So you asked me what's present for me, or however you worded that. And I think it's this idea of trying to be gentle with myself, gentle with ourselves. There's such a not necessarily unhealthy. Like there's a desire for us to, like, we just talked about it, to grow, to change, to become our best selves, and climb the mountains and hustle, or whatever it is. And all of that is beautiful. That's part of the human spirit, and we go for big things, and all of that's awesome. And as I said earlier, we are also just these human beings living in these human bodies, and we just have these hearts that need care and love, and so I was doing just a writing exercise. I sometimes do this where I just like close my eyes and just free write. And this idea of being gentle with myself and of kind of offering that to somebody else was what emerged. So I'll give you just the first verse and chorus of this song that I'm working on. I think it's going to be called Gentle. So it may or may not be in the right key. I really don't know. I just threw the capo down, so we'll see. You give your love to everyone, a power line of the sun, always hopeful for the best, with softened eyes but a heavy chest. Now the lines they must extend to the one you least defend. Ever wait until the end to be gentle with yourself.
Oh my. What do I say after that? That's fantastic.
No worry. I forgot the chords there for the middle and the chorus, but I just worked it out anyways. That's raw.
beautiful, and couldn't be actually a better song for even our conversation today. And I have a question, because you presented it and I'm split screen with you. Does that kind of mean it's a duet? Like, is that our song now, Peter?
Yeah, I think our lawyers are going to have to be in touch. There's going to be some royalty splits,
Sure.
all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having this conversation. And I know for folks that are probably going, wow, I want to hear more. Speaker Spotlight, the best way for folks to reach out to you. How can folks learn about having you work with them, their organizations? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Speaker Spotlight is they're the dream team, and obviously, peterkatz.com for more of the music side of what I do. peterkatzspeaks.com. Obviously, any work that I do with organizations, there's lots of music involved. So peterkatzspeaks.com would be a great place to check out and be in touch. And then if we're doing a booking, it would go through the wonderful folks at Speaker Spotlight.
Amazing. Thanks very much, my friend. Have a good rest of the week. And yeah, thanks again for sharing with us.
My pleasure, Tim. Thank you so much.